I think the allure of the warm sound of tubes or valves can be very appealing to many audiophiles, but its big limitation, which is often power, can dictate the speakers that we need to use rather than maybe choose to use. So when I was approached with reviewing the Synthesis Roma 510ac, which seemed like a high power tube integrated amplifier for pretty reasonable money, it very much appealed to me because I thought it could be a tube amplifier suitable for a wide range of speakers and therefore a wide range of us. And it's actually been the easiest review I've ever done.
Life goes up and it goes down. Life goes up and it goes down. Life goes up and it goes down. Life goes up and it goes down.
Synthesis are an Italian hi-fi manufacturer that until recently I wasn't even aware of, but they've been in business I think for over 30 years. And it seems like building high power tube amplifiers is a thing of theirs, because looking on their website, their flagship monoblock amplifier can deliver 500 watts of tube power, which seems insane to me, but you want one though, now, right? Of course you do. And the 510ac I have here is from the Roma line, which is Synthesis's entry-level line, and it costs £3,599. So it's definitely not entry-level priced, so my expectations were of course high. I also think this all-black finish with the cage on, with its very stealth-like design, is nice to look at. And the cage can be removed, but it's screwed in place. The stealth-like design continues when you power the amplifier on, as you're not overwhelmed with lots of bright LEDs. In fact, there is just one indicating what input is being used, and I like this approach to the design. And even the volume control is stealth-like. Actually, the big circular indent indicator I could see sat back at my listening position 12 or so feet away, even in dim light, so I definitely appreciated this. For some technicals, the 510ac can deliver 80 watts of power per channel, but that's at 6 ohms, which in a way, I wish they just gave us the power rating at 8 ohms, of course, because it's more common. But when I looked at the spec sheet, the output from this amplifier is at 6 ohms also. So probably giving us the power rating at 6 ohms for a 6 ohm output is the most accurate way to do it. And it's a push-pull pentode integrated amplifier using 12AX7 for input, 12BH7 for driver tubes, and KT88 for the power tubes. And the PS Vane KT88 tubes that were included to replace a set would cost around £100. They are not expensive tubes to replace, as you might need to down the line. But hold that thought for a minute, as there is something very important here to know. One thing that Synthesis mention about this amplifier is their use of high-grade iron silicon output transformers for better sound quality. But this is not an overly heavy amplifier by tube amplifier standards, weighing 25 kilograms. And for practicality, of course, it's a tube amplifier. It's going to run hotter than most modern solid state amplifiers. But actually quite surprising, considering it is more, higher powered. It didn't produce, a room warming noticeable amount of heat. It just got warm. And yeah, of course, ventilation is going to be important for any tube amplifier. I definitely wouldn't put this in a cupboard, but, I didn't really notice, any kind of crazy heat. You certainly wouldn't want to cook your dinner on it. But one thing I did find really interesting, which maybe is a bit of a quirk, looking on the website, I couldn't find any information about biasing the tubes here. I looked through the manual and there was no instructions for it either, so I had to ask. And by all accounts, Synthesis are not intended for the customers or the users of this amplifier to bias the tubes. I assume they're installed and biased at the factory, and that is how you listen to this amplifier, kind of like a one and done. So I think if you're an audiophile who would be keen to do a lot of tube rolling, to mess around with different tubes, then this is probably not the amplifier for you, because it's not going to be very easy, or maybe even possible, to try different tubes in here. However, if you're the audiophile who's looking for simplicity, just a one and done type of situation, well then of course this amplifier could have appealed to you. Just as a quick edit, this wasn't built into my review script, but I literally had an email come through partway as I was shooting this email, and it's from the UK distributor for Synthesis. And basically they've explained with the biasing side of things that obviously the Roma line is designed to be, easy for customers to use, as we've mentioned before. But it is possible for customers to bias the tubes, but the intent is for the customer to speak to their dealer so the dealer can help and advise through the process to save customers who are not really sure, they don't really know what they're doing, to save them making mistakes and getting anything wrong. So it is possible to bias tubes. It is possible to do that yourself as a customer, but it's not necessarily easy. It's not as easy as with other solutions. But edit out, back to the main review. And one thing that I definitely appreciated is that this is just an integrated amplifier. No DAC, no phono stage, no headphone amplifier. Really glad about that. It's just a HiFi integrated amplifier. So I think you can see the simplistic approach nature of the intent here. And that extends further on the rear, as there are only 5 single-ended inputs, no balanced, which is a shame, but I kind of expected that with a tube amplifier. And there is just one set of speaker cable terminals or taps. As I previously mentioned, they are 6 ohms. So simplicity is big here. And that meant within just a couple of minutes really of installation, I was away listening to music. And I have owned the Mission 770 speakers for about a year now. And I have been really keen to listen to them with a tube amplifier, as I know their design makes them quite tube amp friendly. And the closest I've been so far is with my review of the superb and similarly priced Audio Zen Embrace hybrid tube-free solid-state power designed amplifier, and I really liked it with the Missions. But the Synthesis is offering something very different, and I appreciated it for very different reasons. The Synthesis sound is very easy to speak about because it has a very obvious character. It sounds very bold, very warm, very lush, very smooth, super smooth. So you could say that sounds very tube-like. But interestingly, it's not so smooth as to become overly soft. It's still quite a lively, quite a punchy, quite a ballsy sounding amplifier. So for me, it kind of sits somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. If we think there's kind of ultra soft and romantic, and we have ultra analytical and very kind of crisp and sharp, for me, the Synthesis sits somewhere in the middle, but definitely more towards the warmer side of that overall spectrum. Kind of what we might expect from a KT88 based tube amplifier. And for me, its superpower is its musical flow. It smooth and gracefully flows like a calm sea. And that is because the edges of the music are quite rounded off, so transients are more softly delivered, and there are some distinct pros and cons to this. The distinct big pro is, as I mentioned, the music's flow, or the musical flow. It's just from one note smoothly rolls onto the next and onto the next and so on. You get the idea. And for me, that makes this amplifier very undemanding. Undemanding of maybe of speakers, undemanding of source quality, hi-fi system quality, and undemanding of music quality. Everything sounds smooth, everything sounds warm, bold, and lush. Literally everything. And of course, that could have massive appeal to you, depending on where you're coming from and where you're looking to go with the system. And warm sound in this amplifier very much is. It's rich and bold in the vocals, rich and bold, solid and sure-footed in the bass. Maybe not the tightest bass, maybe the bass is a bit overly bold and overly bloomed at times, but again, it's very pleasing. And then you get a softer and ultra smooth treble. So to me, it's a curated sound aimed at being very pleasing across a wide variety of music, with maybe less than perfect speakers and less than perfect hi-fi systems and rooms. But the downside to this type of approach is that you can't have that kind of softer transient, softer edges, and also have a very ultra clear overall soundstage. You can't have a very carved out in stone, organized soundstage when you have transients and edges to the music that are this kind of soft and rounded off. But don't get me wrong, the soundstage is still good from this amplifier. Left to right was good, not the best I've had in this room, but good. Front to back, also good. Definitely more coming forwards, good. Not quite as good as others I've had in here going back, but still, a pleasing, a satisfying overall soundstage. And I think a lot of this is all dictated by the fact that there is definitely a bloom to the sound, a bloom to the music. But it's a pleasing, like what I would call maybe like a glossy bloom, a smoothing bloom, a kind of, a luscious type of bloom to the music. And I think this is where maybe some reviewers would, call out phrases like maybe chocolatey sounding, which might mean something to you. It doesn't, mean much to me. It means, for me, it means bloom, a bloom to the sound. But again, like it's a pleasing one, right? It's one that you can, easily just sit and listen to. It maybe not be too over analytical about in your thinking in terms of what you're listening to. Maybe adding this bloom, adding this softness and sweetness and lusciousness could be a great balancing act for you without you still losing liveliness and dynamics. But at this price point of around £3,500, there is a lot of competition. And I have another KT88 based tube integrated amplifier here, the Galion TS120 Special Edition, which is the tube integrated amplifier that YouTube reviewer Thomas & Stereo is the man behind. And listening between these two amplifiers I found super interesting because they both use KT88 tubes. So I assumed they would have very similar sounds, but they don't. They sound totally different. You can hear straight away that the Galion is looking to go one better in certain key areas over the Synthesis. It's looking to give you a sound with much more specificity, more high frequency detail and information, more vocal clarity and pop, with a tighter, more focused, less bloomed overall sound. And interestingly, the Galion is several amplifiers in one, but all of its different sound modes, you could call them, sounded like this compared to the Synthesis, but maybe just to more or less degrees, depending on which mode I was listening in. The result is the Galion gives you a much more of what I call a see-through sound, see through the speakers onto the music, with the soundstage being much more carved out, elements of the soundstage being carved out much more in stone, like I'd mentioned before. And there is just more clarity, much more clarity to absolutely everything. And in a way, the Galion reminds me more of a solid state, a modern sounding or a solid state amplifier in that regard, whereas the Synthesis is more of a vintage. It makes me feel of more of a vintage type of sounding amplifier. And I know the Galion has been designed with a V-curved shaped delivery, so more energy in the treble and bass than the mid-band, which works well for lower listening levels. And I think the Synthesis does sound maybe a little better, turned up a bit, as it's more soft at the top, maybe more bold in the upper bass, mid-bass, vocal region, darker presentation, just has a bit more pop at louder volumes. But interestingly, at lower volumes, it still has this lovely, bold, rich, smooth, lovely, flowing sound. So that actually makes listening to maybe the radio or maybe something like Roon's radio function, like a random type of function. Or maybe if you just got a very eclectic music collection and music taste, listening across this wide selection of music, even at lower volumes, is still very, very ultra pleasing and enjoyable with the Synthesis. And I could go on talking about, the specific differences and details. But the big one for me here is the Synthesis is offering a warmer, smoother, less fussy sound that's definitely not as audiophile good as the Galion. But you may prefer the Synthesis in your system for its smooth, unfussy, always warm and pleasing, lovely flowing musical delivery. You may prefer that in your system, especially if you're looking for a tube amplifier that's suitable for maybe normal demand, not high demand, but normal demand types of speakers with simplicity, with real ease of use. However, I think, some audiophiles might find this type of sound a little bit too suffocating to the specifics of the music. So it really will depend on your taste, what you like, maybe what system you've got. So it's definitely worth auditioning. It's definitely worth listening to. It's an extremely pleasing amplifier to listen to. But I do think, or do wish, that Synthesis gave us some way to bias the tubes, because then we could do a little bit of tube rolling and maybe find, ways to tweak the sound to our taste. I'm that type of audiophile who appreciates that. And I do think because there are competitor products around this type of price point, Prima Luna and the Galion, as I've been speaking about, that offer tube bias functions, I think even auto bias as well. I do feel like it is something that is definitely missing from this type of product. But of course, you might see it completely differently because you might appreciate the just simplistic one and done, just kick back and listen to music type of approach. So I hope you've enjoyed this review. I hope you found it useful and helpful. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button. And if you appreciate my take on hi-fi and hi-fi reviewing, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks very much for watching,